Good morning. Call the meeting to order. And I'll call for a motion and second to grant a leave of absence to Commissioner O'Halloran, who's out of town.
So moved.
Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
None.
Thank you. I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of January 8th, 2020.
I so move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Curtis, if you could give us the executive director's report, please.
Terrific. Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, visitors, port staff. Welcome. I'd like to start this morning first by recognizing our safety champions up here. Again, just highlighting port employees who are going above and beyond, trying to help keep themselves and their coworkers safe. So thank you to the safety champions. Stan, would you start us off, please, with a safety message?
Yes. My safety message today aims to heighten awareness to American Heart Month. Heart disease is the leading cause of death for both men and women. Every year, 1 in 4 deaths are caused by heart disease, more than cancer. To prevent heart disease and increase awareness of its effects, the Port is proudly participating in American Heart Month. You can make healthy changes to lower your risk of developing heart disease. Controlling and preventing risk factors is also important for people who already have heart disease. Heart disease can often be prevented when people make informed choices to manage their health conditions. To lower your risk, watch your weight, quit smoking and stay away from secondhand smoke, control your cholesterol and blood pressure. If you drink alcohol, drink only in moderation. Get active and improve your fitness, and eat a healthy diet. We make a difference at the Port. Last Friday, we celebrated National Wear Red Day to raise awareness about the #1 health problem that affects American women, which is heart disease. Throughout the emphasis month and whole year, our wellness program affords us the opportunity to gain education and training to combat heart disease. Fitness activities are enabled with facilitators, equipment, bike storage, and shower facilities. In addition, all port facilities are equipped with automated external defibrillators, or AEDs, and there are 30 public AEDs within PDX itself. The Port Fire Department offers CPR and AED training certification twice a month through our PDX Lifesavers program. And with the 2-year certification period, nearly 50% of our workforce is certified in high-quality CPR and AED use. This fact benefits us at work, throughout PDX, and in the community. So make a difference in the community. Spread the word about strategies for preventing heart disease by staying active and fit. Encourage people to live heart-healthy lives. Learn cardiopulmonary resuscitation, hands-only CPR, and how to use an automated external defibrillator. That's my message, Curtis.
Great. Thank you, Stan. I'll note that our executive team, and I'm thinking, Dan, we might need to confirm that you've done the training, but our entire executive team went to our own fire department last year and had one of our ET meetings out there, and all got trained by firefighter Laney Hill in CPR and AED readiness. You've got that, Dan, so just as confirming we're all safe. Thank you, Stan. Thanks for the message. I had the distinct good fortune, I think I'm going to say, of going to Washington, D.C. last week and testifying in front of Senator Blumenauer's Ways and Means Subcommittee on Trade and Global Opportunity. It was actually a great opportunity for me. I'd never done it before. It was super intimidating, but kind of fun as well, also to see that not everything in Washington, D.C. is broken. We talked in the committee about investment in infrastructure that helps get goods and people to market, and in particular about a resilient runway out here at PDX, something that we have in our long-term plan. It was really fun. Also, we talked about fully spending the harbor maintenance tax. This is a tax that's collected and used to fund dredging of waterways in the United States. Historically, it has not all been spent. It accrues, and a bill that has passed out of the House, I believe, a few weeks ago, I believe written by Congressman DeFazio, Chairman DeFazio from Oregon, would require spending all of that harbor maintenance tax on dredging work. So we're also supportive of that bill, and ongoing support of dredging of the Columbia River. So lots of fun for me. On the less fun news side, coronavirus, I think everyone has heard enough about now, very much in the news. I'll just say both on the aviation side and on the marine side, we're prepared and ready. Talking about readiness, of course, we don't have any flights directly to and from China flying into PDX, but our team has prepared for the eventuality if we had to have an aircraft arrive, how we'd manage that and keep the coronavirus out of the airport, which is our plan. If that were to happen, we'd do that outside PDX. We'd do it out on the airfield with buses transporting passengers, but that is not imminent. We don't see that happening. On the marine side, vessels are required, Dan, 96-hour notice, is that right, to the Coast Guard about the health of their crew and the status of their crew. So we're continuing to monitor vessels that call on Portland, and we'll just keep you posted. It's interesting to watch a lot of our partners react. The airports that are designated to receive passengers, we're tracking closely from China and from Asia. Also, a number of the airlines have now stopped flying directly to China, and that's something we're also monitoring in terms of our direct flight to Tokyo and how that plays out over time. I know businesses are also thinking about how they react. So we'll just keep you posted there. No issues to report, but very interesting potential impacts out there. Good news on the marine front. We celebrated last week with SM Line, and I believe yesterday was, Keith, the 5th vessel call. Production has been very good out at T6. We're just really excited about the call and the movement of cargo to and from Asia directly from the Port of Portland. 2 weeks ago, we were out there and saw the largest container vessel ever to call at T6, 6,500 or 6,600 TEU vessel, the SM Line Ningbo. Just super exciting to be out there and have the port functioning really well again. I want to thank Commissioner Lamb and her husband Daniel for hosting a couple weeks ago the celebration of Lunar New Year at PDX. It was really great, dancing dragons and kids, and just a great event. So thank you very much for your commitment and support of the employees over at PDX. We also are celebrating this month at the Port Black History Month, and have had essentially designed and instigated by employees a number of events celebrating Black history. Just last week, we welcomed Sebe Khan, an West African dance and drum group that translates to the serious sound in English. Just a really exciting bunch of activities this month at the port. So grateful to employees for leading that effort and recognizing the importance of Black history in our community. Finally, just really looking forward to a lot of activity in the spring here. We will keep you all posted, but it's very busy out there. You'll note PDX Next continues its sort of full-throated progress. We'll be back. I believe you have a couple items today, but everything is going well. We continue to be on time and on budget out at the E-Concourse extension, and the piles are being driven out here at the Parking Addition Consolidated Rental Car Facility, and we're just beginning to see the specific work around how the big roof and terminal core will happen here in a couple of years. So lots of fun coming, and you'll hear more about it later this morning. That, Madam President, is the extent of my remarks.
Thank you. Call for motion and second for approval of the Executive Director's report. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment? Okay. We have several consent items on the agenda today. Does any commissioner need a presentation on the consent items? I'll read the title. The 2020 Port of Portland Transportation Improvement Plan and the Port of Portland Fire Department Civil Service Commission appointment, Portland International Airport. Okay. Hearing no need for presentation, I'll ask for a motion and second for approval of the consent items.
And second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Dan, could you please introduce the first agenda item?
Yes, thank you. The next agenda item is a very minor budget adjustment. Curtis referred to the SM line calls that have been happening, and this adjustment is to account for some incentive funds from the state of Oregon that will pass through the port's accounts and be doled out to SM lines to offset some of their startup costs. So here to give a brief update on how the service is going is Jeff Owens, Marine Ops Director, and Suzanne Kenny, Director of Budget, Financial Planning and Analysis, will present the budget adjustment agenda item.
Good morning and thank you. There it is. Thank you. Perfect. So just wanted to share with you the success we've enjoyed over the first, it's now 5 calls of the SM line container vessels out at Terminal 6. I think it reflects just a really great partnership between the port, our Stevedore Harbor Industrial, and of course labor, who are actually doing the work, lifting the boxes and so forth. So these are the numbers. As you can see, we had some higher numbers, and now they're settling out into the 300 to 400 range, which is what we were expecting. The empties are, the line is pre-locating empty boxes for their customers in the area, so that when they're ready to load, they just pick up a load and call for an empty container and so forth. So that's why you see those higher numbers on the first 3 calls. Other than that, the productivity numbers that you see at the bottom are really in the range that we were hoping for. We feel very good about that. And really that's it. I think things are going very well so far. And as we build a data set of more vessels, we'll really have an understanding of how things are going. But so far, quite good. And with that, I'll turn it over to Suzanne for the actual budget item.
Good morning. So we're here today to request approval of a budget adjustment to provide for the unanticipated pass-through incentives from the state of Oregon to SM Line Corporation, as Dan noted earlier. And this is in support of reestablishing the regular container service at Terminal 6. So the port has entered into an agreement with the state of Oregon whereby the state has agreed to provide $500,000 in incentive funds to SM Lines in support of their startup costs associated with their container service. Since the port has the agreement with SM Line, the state will disperse the incentive funds to the port, and we will in turn disperse them to SM. The funds will be dispersed at $20,000 per vessel call and are expected to be expended in full by June 30th, 2020, or the end of our current fiscal year. Under Oregon budget law, pass-through transactions such as this must be budgeted and accounted for as separate resources and requirements. And the budget adjustment is shown on the screen here and also in the agenda item and the associated exhibits. It includes an increase to the general fund resources of $500,000 and an increase in the general fund marine operating expense in the same amount. I'd also like to point out that this project is funded in part with Oregon State Lottery funds that are administered by the Oregon Business Development Department. The situation was not anticipated at the time the port's budget was adopted in June. Therefore, we are here seeking commission approval today to expend these funds. So with that, staff requests approval of the executive director's recommendation.
Thank you. Commissioner.
Yeah, I would just like to speak in favor of this. I think it's a very appropriate use of these funds and really applaud Governor Brown in coming forward with this $500,000 to help get the shipping back open. So wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Just a quick question. The $500,000 is to be fully distributed to SM Lines, or is there an administrative overhead charge that the port is able to attach to it, or?
No, it's just strictly a pass-through.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask for a motion and second for approval of the executive director's recommendation. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Dan Blofeld will introduce the next agenda item.
Thank you. So the next agenda item requests authorization to issue bonds to refund certain outstanding bonds in order to achieve debt service savings at PDX. This is essentially a refinancing of certain outstanding bonds where we can achieve meaningful savings. The bonds to be refunded have a call date coming up on July 1, which presents the opportunity for the savings. Lisa Fideli, Director of Capital Finance and Debt Management, is here to present the recommendation this morning. Lisa?
Thanks, Dan. Good morning. This action requests approval of Ordinance 469B, which would authorize the issuance of up to $90 million of Series 26 airport refunding revenue bonds. The bonds to be refunded are the Series 20 bonds. They were issued in 2010 in the amount of $157 million. There's currently $88 million outstanding. The Series 20 bonds funded the baggage handling system, the completion of the North Runway extension, and they refunded the Series 12 bonds. Their final maturity date is July 1st, 2040, and they're callable, as Dan said, on July 1st of this year. So like the Series 20 bonds, the Series 26 bonds would be fixed rate general airport revenue bonds with the same final maturity date. These are called subordinate lien bonds, or also SLBs, as you see on the screen, and those are actually the most senior lien that the port has. So the use of proceeds would refund the Series 20 bonds, make a deposit to the debt service reserve if needed, and pay for the issuance costs of issuing the Series 26 bonds. The refunding bonds are benefiting from the continued low interest rate environment. Considering the time value of money, the net savings after issuance costs are factored in is estimated to be $10.8 million, and the total cost savings, dollar savings, is $12.6 million. So today we're requesting approval of the ordinance. We expect to get a rating from Standard & Poor's, who rates all of the port's bonds, in March. And in April, we plan to price and close the refunding bonds. There are specific actions that need to take place. I'm going to read the recommendation from the Executive Director. The Executive Director recommends that Ordinance 469B in the form presented to the Commission be read by title only, and that a public hearing be held prior to adopting Ordinance 469B, and that the proposed Ordinance 469B in the form presented to the Commission be enacted by a roll call vote, and that the Executive Director or his designee is authorized to execute the necessary documents on behalf of the Commission in a form approved by Council.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions for Lisa before we open the public hearing? Commissioner, please.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. I'm just curious, so the savings, which is always great to save money, the $10 to $12 million in savings, kind of what happens to that? Because those are a lot of costs that I think that we were expecting the airlines ultimately to pick up the costs on. And then it's a separate question, but is there any structure within the port about how JP Morgan actually invests these funds? And do we have a policy around that?
So the savings, the Series 20 bonds are paid by the airlines as well as revenues from the Port Cost Center. So the allocable share of savings would go to each. So the airlines will be saving money on the debt service that they otherwise would have paid, as well as the Port Cost Center. As far as the investment of the proceeds, they actually go into an escrow held by U.S. Bank, and so the funds will be in a trust account until they're paid off to the bondholders on July 1st.
Any other questions? Okay, open a public hearing. This is a public hearing on ordinance number 469B. Does any member of the public wish to be heard at this time? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. And Lisa, if you could please read the ordinance by title only.
Ordinance number 469B, an ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale in one or more series of not more than $90 million aggregate principal amount of Portland International Airport revenue bonds to refund outstanding Portland International Airport revenue bonds and to pay costs of issuing the bonds and to fund certain reserves if necessary and for any other lawful purpose of the port, authorizing amendments to the port's Airport Revenue Bond Ordinance Number 155 as amended and Airport Revenue Bond Ordinance Number 323 as amended, and authorizing and providing for related matters and documents.
Thank you. Call for a motion and second for approval of the Executive Director's recommendation and adoption of Ordinance 469B.
So move.
I believe it has to be a roll call vote.
Yes. Do we have a second? Pam, would you please do a roll call?
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Cooper Comus,
Aye.
Lamb, Levy, McDonald,
Aye.
Nemi, Pierce, and Saruda.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Call on Vince Granato to introduce the next agenda item, please.
Good morning. Here for another contract amendment. This one for Hoffman and Skanska for Terminal Core. We're entering the next phase of work for them. And again, what we've been trying to do is to bring you pieces as we get through varying levels of the process. This next one is for some pre-construction services. And this will be a little larger contract, and this will be for setting up the prefabrication area. We're going to do a lot of the fabrication of certainly the roof materials across the field, a little bit over by the fire department, which will allow us to be over there in an out of the way of the operation, and then be able to move the roof sections over when it's ready. So we need to get that area ready to go. So I'm going to let George talk about that contract.
Thanks, Vince. Good morning. So today we're asking for about $71 million as amendment for the Hoffman-Skanska contract for the work that Vince just talked about, as well as some of the early enabling work at the terminal building to prepare for the column installation. Here is an image. There we go. It's an image of the terminal building. As Vince mentioned and Curtis earlier, we're replacing the entire roof of the terminal complex, as well as building a new roof obviously over the western expansion. One of our challenges is how do we do this in a manner that is both cost effective, safe to the traveling public, and minimizes the disruptions to the operations. So our solution, rather than do it for a stick-built situation like you'd see in a downtown skyscraper, is to prefab as much as possible over in the prefabrication yard over here shown in the green. The strategy around that is what we will do is grub all the soil, put a lot of asphalt down there, some concrete, do some drainage systems so we can build the roof in one big section over in that area. The roof weighs about 12 million pounds when it's fully assembled. We'll then disassemble it into big sections of about 120 by 180 feet, and bring that over in big sections and slide that over the existing operation over the building over a period of about 4 or 5 months. We also, part of this amendment is to prepare the logistics center. We'll have anywhere from 600 to 800 craft workers at a time working on the project. So how do we process all those craft workers, both get them through security and transport them to the site? By doing the prefab area, we can keep a lot of them that are working on the roof off the terminal building, but the remainder need to get to the terminal building. So this also includes preparing parking, trailer facilities, and security to transition all the workers over to the terminal building. Another section of this amendment is to prepare for the initial work activities at the terminal. So the makeup units, we'll be installing 2 new makeup units. The makeup units are the devices that sort the bags after TSA analyzes and screens the checked bags. The airlines then take it off the makeup devices, put them on baggage carts, and put it on the planes themselves. So we're providing 2 new makeup devices for this project for both capacity and flexibility as we do the construction. We'll also be preparing for the initial columns that will hold the roof up. There are 6 columns that go through the area behind Bag Road. The columns themselves are about 6 foot diameter, and then we need to prepare about 20 feet for the pile caps, the concrete and the piles that will hold the columns up. So we got to really free up all of that space, whether it's mechanical rooms, electrical rooms, storage rooms, to enable that work to occur. The next group of columns basically fall down through the concourse corridor connector, and the next group of columns are out in the middle of the western expansion. So from a scheduling perspective, this is the first portion of the major work associated with TCORE itself. We're waiting for the completion of the terminal balancing concourse E extension to take down a couple of the gates in the alleyway and start the utility work, which will occur June-July timeframe. Concourse B right now is being some of the early demolition activities are occurring at B. It's on schedule for completion May of 2021. This June, we start the major portion of the work at TCORE with about a 5-year construction schedule. These are some of the future amendments. If you remember last month, we were anticipating about $140 million for the March. We've brought some of that work back to this. We're anticipating $30 million this month, $140 next month. We brought a lot of that back to this month. So we're thinking about $80 million next month with the civil construction and some of the pre-purchase of the roofing materials themselves. And there's a series of future amendments that we're still working on all of the timing and details around. But the major portion of it will come with the building demolition, and then sometime in the middle of next year with the guaranteed maximum price for the remainder of the project. We're still tracking to our $1.6 billion budget with $191 million of contingency. Small business participation, we're tracking to the 20% goal. We're a little bit above that on some of the earlier work with the Concourse B work. The enabling work around the columns, we're about 30 to 35% small business participation. Right now, we're right about 20% overall. That's primarily because some of the early work is heavy on some of the Hoffman-Skanska general conditions, but we still anticipate meeting the 20% overall goal. And from a ZGF perspective, they're a little less than 10% right now, but we're still trying to get up to the 10% overall. To date, Commission has approved about $133 million in contracts with the Hoffman-Skanska. With this amendment, will be about $204 million. Staff recommends approval of the Executive Director's recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? I think my main issue is not a comment more than a question, is obviously, given the weight of this roof, the safety issues I think are huge, and I just want to make sure that we're keeping that sort of at the forefront on all these projects as we move forward with the contractor.
100%. It is our most important factor.
Great. Thank you. Any other? Okay. Hearing none, I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the Executive Director's recommendation.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I'll call in Dan Pippinger to introduce the next agenda item, please.
Good morning. Thank you. It's a little hard to follow that act. That's pretty big. This item is to request approval to award a public improvement contract for the North Apron Remain Overnight Parking reconstruction. It's a strategic investment in the ability to handle aircraft and grow service here at PDX. And I thought it would be valuable to have the Director of Airport Operations, Darren Griffin, explain a little bit about Remain Overnight Parking and gate utilization. And then Chris Edwards, the project manager, will describe the contract.
Good morning. Thank you, Dan. As we talked about this agenda item, I don't think we've ever brought a Remain Overnight Parking apron project to this commission, so it seemed like a good opportunity to give a little background on how that program works here at PDX. Usually we park airplanes on ramps that were built for other reasons, and so this is an intentional investment. And I think most of you are probably aware how busy it is here early in the morning. Typically at night, we're very full of aircraft, and that's because we're one of those airports that operates at the edge of all the airline domestic networks. And so every morning they want to fill up their routes with planes from places like PDX and get their aircraft out of here as soon as possible. So to really understand how important this RON parking concept is, I want to talk a little bit about our gates here at PDX. And so, excuse me, 20 years ago, we finished building Concourse C, and that put us at about 46 total contact gates, so a jet bridge, if you will, jet bridge gate. And we operated with that number for most of the last 20 years until last year, where we started seeing construction impacts and the number started coming down a bit. And as you can see there, 40 is where we're going to be spending a lot of time here the next 3 years. And 40 is really the bare minimum number of gates that we can operate our flight schedule off here at PDX. That's one of the things we've done in terminal core design, was to model our busiest month, which is August, and then a typical day. And you figure out how many gates does it take to allow every airline to operate the flights they want to operate. And so for us, that magic number is 40. And that puts a lot of pressure on those 40 gates. That they have to be really efficient. We have to be able to provide air carriers access to those gates as quickly as possible. You can see we get a little bit of relief there here in the June-July timeframe when Concourse E extension comes online. But it's very short-lived because then terminal core starts and we pretty much lose the same number of gates to that construction project. So we're in a pretty pressurized environment for gate utilization for the next 3 to 4 years. And you can see as we get towards the end of the terminal core program, we get into really good shape in terms of gate availability and more ability to grow flights here. So as far as the RON spots themselves, we forecast how many requests we're going to get over a year, and we break that down by, every night. Right now, we expect to get between 23 and 25 requests from airlines for an off-gate place to park an airplane. The port controls and manages the available spots that you see listed there. Right now, it's at 19. And so every afternoon, our on-duty airport duty manager starts building the schedule for that night as the calls come in from the airlines of what they have to park and where they would like to park it. And even though we show a deficit there, I want to be very clear that we always find a place to park every airplane every night. It gets interesting at times as we get into the busy summer season. There's a lot of things that impact how many requests we're getting. Weather on the East Coast can impact planes here in Portland overnight. If they're having congestion or delays or weather in SeaTac, we typically get their airplanes if there's any sort of irregular operation. Weather here, mechanicals, crew shortages, anything can impact how many airplanes are on the ground at any time. And so our ability to always be able to accommodate aircraft operations, requests from airlines is really critical to our ability to operate those 40 gates as efficiently as possible. And what this allows is the air carriers to have these airplanes parked here and then to feed their gates as quickly as possible. All of these positions, either the aircraft are taxied from the position to the gate or they tow them all. And my last slide here is the locations of where we're doing that right now. And the orange there, kind of on the left of the slide, is the space we got back from the National Guard in 2012. You'll see Alaska 737s parked out there every night. Typically, they're gone by early morning. They're really great at using that. It's worked really well for them. And the yellow there, the Southeast, Southwest, Alaska, American, they all park airplanes down there. And then on the north side, which is what Chris is going to talk about in this agenda item in the green and blue, is really where you see, as you drive in here, sometimes you see Condor, Iceland Air, Southwest, United, Delta. They're all trying to park planes out there at different days of the week, different times of day. And so The real key here is you want the planes to be as close as possible to the gates. That's what really creates efficiency for the air carrier, is the shortest possible tow to the gate, so that as soon as they push an aircraft and it goes on its way, they have the next aircraft inbound under tow, and they can quickly use that gate, turn it, start filling that hold room with the next group of passengers. So adding to this inventory is really important right now as you think about all the construction we have in front of us. So this intentional investment that Chris is going to talk about is really valuable and in a really great location. When you think about the Concourse E extension opening in June, this creates a great RON parking for Southwest. Everybody on the north side will have 16 parking spots out there and 26 gates on the north side. And so you can almost fill up your next aircraft bank from this new parking arrangement. I will stop there. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer it, and I'll let Chris go through the agenda item for the request.
Thanks, Darren. Good morning. Today I'm requesting approval to award a construction contract to Wheatman Excavation for the North Apron RON parking reconstruction project in the amount of a little over $10 million. This shows the overall project location. As Darren mentioned, it's just east of the Concourse E extension. With this project, we will be demoing buildings, removing utilities, taking out the existing asphalt and placing concrete, placing a new security fence, high mast lighting, as well as closed circuit TV or CCTV. At the end of this project, we will have an ability to park 10 more aircraft. This shows the overall project schedule. Again, the item before you today is bolded. This project is intended to be completed by October of this year. Our budget and funding, excuse me, there before you is Wheatman's contract, personal services contract that was for our design engineers, which was awarded through the executive director's delegated authority. Port staff contracted services covers such items as our management, inspection, testing, geotech, things of that nature. Building abatement, we need to take the hazardous materials out of the buildings prior to demoing them, so that is there. Contingency for this project is 15%, which is a little more than we usually go in, but it's appropriate given the risk involved in the project, as well as this being a new contractor involved with the airfield. It is funded out of our airline cost center, and our small business goal is 9%, which the contractor identified 9.1% participation for the contract. Staff requests approval, executive director's recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions?
I'm curious as to the small business set aside. It's a single digit, and it's probably the lowest target I've seen recently. Is there something about this that would influence that?
About the project?
No, the small business set aside at 9%.
I guess I'm not quite understanding the question.
I think the question is the target.
Yeah,
Kimberly, do you want to
9%
speak to the availability?
Yeah.
Is that, I assume?
Yeah,
It's a DBE funded project, so we were only able to look at those that are certified as DBE and not all that are MWESB, so it's a lower pool. And it was based on the availability from our disparity study.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll call for a motion and second to approve the executive director's recommendation. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Dan, you have our last item for today.
Thank you. This item is to request approval for the award of a public improvement contract for the Southeast Taxiway T or Tango project. Brant Foster, the engineering project manager, will introduce it. I think the only thing I'd like to say about this is that it's a routine asset renewal But it's been timed to take advantage of the disruption at Concourse B and Concourse A as part of the PDX Next program, so that we minimize the operational disruption and actually design this project to integrate fully with our new kind of operating pro forma there in the Concourse B area. Grant?
All right. Thank you, Dan, and good morning. Today, as Dan mentioned, we are asking for approval to award a public improvement contract to Tapani for the Southeast Taxiway T Rehabilitation Project in the amount of just under $8.6 million. Now, this project is on the south side of the terminal and will include the rehabilitation of Taxiway T by removing the upper 4 inches of asphalt and replacing back in kind. We're going to be expanding on the Taxiway B shoulders so they can meet current FAA criteria. And we're going to be working on the Concourse B ramp to realign the ramp so that it'll match up with new gates being created by the Concourse Extension Project. Now, moving on in front of you, you see the schedule for this project with the commission action item in bold. And I guess the one thing important to note on this project is we are going to be built over 2 construction seasons. So the bulk of the work is going to be done this year. However, we have an agreement with the airlines to keep gates B1 and B2 open throughout 2020. Therefore, that portion of the work is going to be completed in 2021. All right, moving on to the budget and funding slide, you can see the public improvement contract on top. We had some electrical procurement items for long lead items that the project's going to require, and we had some personal service contracts help out with the development of the design of the project. Now, this project is going to be carrying a 10.5% contingency, which is deemed appropriate given its size and complexity. And as you can see, we actually have 2 funding sources on this project, with the FAA expecting to contribute $6.4 million to the project, and the Airline Cost Center contributing the rest. So we have a DBE goal of 9.5% on this project, and the contractor has agreed to meet that goal. So at this time, staff request executive director recommendation, approval of executive director recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions? Bob?
Just wondering, so if an airline calls to park an airplane, they pay extra to park that for the night, or what do they? Different numbers of different areas?
They do pay a fee to park at night. I don't know if they set it for different locations, but they do pay to park the aircraft at night.
That cover the cost of the improvement time, or is it just spread over the entire facility charges?
So that goes to the Airline Cost Center, which is funding these airfield projects, right? So that's kept in that portion of the port's cost containment in the airfield and Airline Cost Center. So it goes as a credit to that against all the debits of operating and building the facilities.
Did that answer for you? Okay. Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the executive director's recommendation. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.